Death March to Parallel World Rhapsody is an isekai fantasy adventure light novel written by Hiro Ayanana. This is my optimistic and spoiler-free review of Volume 2, as translated by Yenon. Just before we get into the thick of it, as of today, which is the 13th of August, an anime PV was released for the series, which is fantastic. I think the series will work really well animated, and based on the intro, it looks like the show is going to go to the end of this Volume 2, if not slightly a bit further, so it's a good time to pick this volume up if you're planning on watching the anime. So Volume 2 continues almost exactly where we left off on the first volume. The viewpoint is all still from Sato, and that's all fantastic if you're like me and you really appreciate the kind of thoughts and processes which go behind a late male in his 20s. He's been in this new body for quite some time now, and he's also now starting to move away from his old morals a little bit. In the first volume, it was just all a bunch of learning about the new land, where things are, what things are. Now we're all, and himself, very familiar with all of this. It's now how can we use all of that and adjust to this normal life. So the party's pretty much the same. We get a few more people in, which we saw at the end of the previous volume. They're all still kids, and my only complaint kind of is that they're all just little girls. We're not getting any guys or dudes or even any adults into this main party. For some, that might not be a problem, but it would be nice for the sake of diversity. Later on in this volume, like with the first volume, you get into a big kind of combat section. This time around, there's no kids really holding him back. So in this combat section, you really get to see what Sato has learned and he gets to apply it. Also, this volume rounds off this arc, so we get lined up for the future ahead and we can kind of get to see where the book is looking to go. So if you cast your mind back to Volume 1, where we had 3 young animal girls, as well as these now 2 newly bought human girls who are now part of this main party. Also remember how Sato at various times has a lot of internal conflict about the cuteness of these girls in his party, where there's a whole bunch more of that internal dialogue which Sato has. I don't necessarily have an issue with it. On the contrary, I think that the truth behind his internal dialogue is the best thing about this book, really. Although one thing I don't like about this is that there's a lot more and I think too much in this volume. For the first half of this book, it just gets, for me at least, overly awkward, considering the supposed age of these girls, but each to their own, I guess. One really good thing that is constantly expanded upon in this series, which actually falls off in a lot of other books which are similar to this, is that the game mechanics are constantly expanded upon. Both the use of when these skills are using, as well as gaining them, are mentioned constantly. Sato actually manages to have a discussion with someone else in this volume regarding the kind of game system. So it's interesting now to see the different kind of reactions he has when these skills kind of pop up and the conversations between people who know about this and the people who don't. During these conversations with these new people, you can really see Sato's internal attitude shifting a lot during all of this. There is a lot less misunderstandings which open up more time for the book actually getting on with things. For example, pretty much anything to do with money now doesn't really discuss anything to do with the actual coinage and more on actual valuation. The other being that he's more quicker to accept how things are, and there's a lot less comparison to his old life. There's still some small talk and still some references back to Earth, which kind of reminds you that this is kind of this weird game that he's in, but there's much less so this time than the first volume. To expand upon the combat scene, which happens later on a bit, it is once again quite lengthy, but this time around there's a lot less kind of learning that Sato is doing as it goes along, and a lot of it is just applied knowledge that he knows about the world now. Another thing I like about the combat in this series is there's a lot less of those kind of time stop thinky moments where the kind of main character stops time and talks about what they're going to do for the next minute or so. Because of this, the fight is well paced. You do have some of those small hand-to-hand details, but as well it gives you kind of overview, and any of those kind of like really crappy fights, it does skip over them, so you don't have to worry about going into too much detail. Aside from all this, the only other thing I'd mention is the relationship which Sato has with Zena. It does get a little bit more intense, but in reality there's still loads more to go on there, and it's just kind of a nice little cute section which is completely different really from the rest of the book. Overall, this volume expands excellently on everything that was great in the first volume. Once again, even the kind of like normal shopping sections get handled fantastically, and the time pacing is great with next to no time jumps. All the characters kind of progress in the ways that are understandable given the time frame, and we've got a few little more characters to mix things up. Once again, the action isn't the majority and the full focus of the book, but it's still a big portion and it's definitely more involved this time around. I have a few worries regarding the average age of the main party, but this volume does end this arc. I can see Sato and the party learning a whole bunch of new things, which will definitely involve a whole bunch of new characters, I just hope that this time the character ages will be a bit higher level. As always, thanks for listening. Until next time.